Hello everybody, my name is Eric, and today it's back! You remember Windows Recall, the creepy feature that was basically built-in spyware for Windows called Recall? Well, they finally think they've gotten the security for it right. It's in release preview, and pretty soon it's going to be out. Although I will say only for Copilot PCs, which is a small part of the Windows market, depending on who you trust. According to the register, they're just not selling. Now, there's different ways of counting. Qualcomm likes to cite in the $800 plus price band in the United States for Windows laptops, it could be as high as 10%. But to me, that seems like, okay, if you exclude everything except the price band that they are most competitive in, okay, it's higher. But no, it is not. The Copilot Plus program has not been a big success. I think that's partially because on Windows laptops is just a really difficult thing. Apple was able to achieve it because Apple has total control over the Mac platform. If they say we're not going to make x86 Macs anymore, software developers have to port to ARM. I think it also struggles because the markets for those are different, and the market for high-end Windows systems is very much a lot of gaming and a lot of specific industry work software, things like CAD, computer design, that only run on Windows, which are not likely in the short term to run on ARM. There's not a lot of people buying a $2,000 Windows computer and using it to browse Reddit. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. They're basically very expensive Chromebooks. Now, they tried to differentiate with this whole AI thing, and there's a separate category of AI PCs, which is any PC that has a neural processing unit. But I think that whole thing is a mess. Interesting AI systems that you would actually want to use require more compute than what can reasonably fit, especially on a laptop. And it's a rapidly evolving industry. I don't think it makes sense to build a whole system around it. And many people seem to agree. So Recall is coming back. These people, they're calling it a productivity feature, which it sort of is. I get the idea of Recall, which is it's a browser history for your whole computer. It will take a screenshot every 10 seconds or so. It will then run optical character recognition, which gets that. So, for example, if you were reading this article, that would mean that you could keyword search this article. And then it's going to use a technique called vector embedding, which will turn all of those pictures into vectors, which is just an array of numbers. And then there's a mathematical way called cosine similarity that can be used to find similar, so that you could find similar stuff. Now, I can see on one hand the appeal of this, especially if you're doing something like spending hours researching something and you want to go back and find an article you were reading. The problem remains the privacy. Now, they say the encryption has been enhanced, and Microsoft is going to explain how it's made it secure. I think a lot of these, much like a lot of Windows security, sort of misses the point. It is incredibly difficult to design a system that is accessible in a useful way to users without also potentially being accessible to threat actors, right? If a program is running with normal privileges, it can access most things you can. That's why info stealers work. There are various ways of trying to beat that, but the way Windows works is difficult. Now, here they're going to use a VBS enclave, but all it would take an exploit that could take advantage of your profile to open it. A lot of these things are going to be very secure against a type of attack that home users really don't encounter, and that is a second account or an untrusted user on the computer tries to access your data. Windows is very secure against that, but that type of attack doesn't really happen. Info stealer tries to open with your account because you ran the wrong file. There's still a threat. What is good is they have fixed the unencrypted state, and they're not going to send the recall data to the cloud. And that's why it's only available on those so-called Copilot PCs, is because it uses AI and they don't want to send it to remote AI. That much I can approve of. I think it makes sense not to have your entire computing history sent to the cloud, although with default settings, Windows unfortunately is coming pretty close to that. The other problem and concern I would have is it just makes, and some people might say they have nothing to hide, but even if we trust the security is perfect, you can be compelled to show your data. And it creates so much more evidence and data about you than would otherwise exist. So I don't like it for that reason as well. So here is the security architecture according to Microsoft. So recall user experience, hypervisor boundary, attacker mode. So it's secure with secure bio. Secure settings, semantic index, snapshot store, hypervisor boundary. Okay, yeah, Windows virtualization-based security is great, but at least, okay, that's good. The issue, though, remains that unless this would protect against a unused but enabled recall that nobody ever uses and the attacker could just get into, won't really have that problem. But if the person ever checks recall, then something running in the background with the same privileges as the user can still get it. They're also working on a new feature that may not be perfect, but will work to filter out national IDs and credit card numbers. Because if you remember my video about recall, I was immediately able to get it to log payment details, which would be clearly undesirable. And they're not sending this, and they say they couldn't decrypt it even if they wanted to, which is probably true. They just send some diagnostic usage to fix bugs. That much I can believe. The best news here is off by default. Recall was initially being shoved down users' throats on by default. Now it makes it very clear. Do you want to enable this? Here's the UI for it. I think that's a pretty big improvement, and you'll also be able to fully remove it, which is good. On Enterprise, it's actually not installed by default, which I imagine was because there was immense pushback. I mean, every IT and security person I know thinks and thought this was an absolute disaster when it was announced. So they're now pushing it further back, and as far as I can tell, it's not coming yet to x86 PCs, although it will eventually, because they are on the very latest generation, those AMD AI PCs, and I think Intel has one as well. They will have the required NPU support, but so far it really doesn't. What was also interesting is while most people were critically panning this idea, there were some people who actually liked it and also wanted it on other operating systems, such as Linux or Mac OS, and here is an open source project that does that. So if you have an x86 PC or are using an operating system that doesn't have recall, you can try this too if it's something you think would be useful. There's also another commercial competitor called Rewind AI. So what it does, same thing, and then you can type screenshots. It's still privacy focused, although inevitably the level of security here is going to be much worse than Microsoft's first-party version. Simply because the encryption here is optional and it's not as deeply integrated into the operating system. You can put it on an external storage device, sure, but that doesn't protect against malware. Here is Elon Musk's comment. I don't totally disagree with him. So you can get time travel, local first AI, semantic search, of course, and full control over your storage. And here is Rewind AI, which is another one that I find potentially a bit more concerning if it's going to be connected. I haven't seen this one yet. Yeah, I personally, I would not want random files from my computer, and even Microsoft agrees, going to anyone's API, especially an API like the OpenAI one that is capable of understanding documents and would have then, if there was something in there they didn't like, would have a very clear description of what you're up to. But I will leave this open source project in the description if anyone does want to try it out. So that's going to be all for this video. Would you ever want to use one of these so-called memory tools? I don't think I would. Let me know in the comments below. Do you trust that there won't be further security issues with this feature? And does the risk warrant the reward? That's all from me for now. Bye.